At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched beneath the left wing of a P-38 Lightning at Dobodura Airfield in New Guinea, watching Lieutenant Robert Hayes prepare for a mission that would probably kill him. Hayes was 23 years old, 6 combat sorties, 0 kills. The Japanese had sent 18 Mitsubishi A6M-0s to intercept the morning patrol. Hayes would be flying straight into them. The math was simple and brutal. In the past 6 weeks, 37 P-38s had gone down over New Guinea. Most were caught in turning fights they couldn't escape. Most pilots never made it back. Hayes would be no different. McKenna watched the pre-flight crew swarm around the aircraft, fueling, arming, checking control surfaces. They had no idea what was hidden inside the left boom. Nobody did. 8 hours earlier, working alone in the darkness while the maintenance crew slept, McKenna had installed a 6-inch piece of piano wire where it absolutely was not supposed to be. It was a modification that violated every regulation in the Army Air Force Maintenance Manual. If discovered, it would mean a court-martial, possibly a dishonorable discharge, maybe prison time. But it might also be the only thing that could save Hayes's life. The engines coughed, then roared to life. Black smoke belched from the exhaust stacks before clearing to a steady blue flame. Hayes ran through his checks, magnetos, oil pressure, control surface movement. Everything registered normal. He had no idea his ailerons were responding to illegally tensioned cables. McKenna stood on the tarmac, hands black with grease, coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid and yesterday's sweat. His stomach churned. The modification had taken 8 minutes to install. He'd added 4/10 of a pound of tension to the aileron control cable, eliminated 3/8 of an inch of slack that Lockheed said was within specifications, 3/8 of an inch. The difference between a pilot rolling out of a Zero's gunfire and dying in a fireball over the jungle. At least, that's what McKenna believed. He'd staked his career on it, staked Hayes's life on it. Hayes released the brakes. The P-38 lurched forward, gathered speed, lifted off. McKenna watched it climb. Twin booms silhouetted against the tropical dawn, propellers cutting silver discs in the humid air. The aircraft joined formation with 16 others, a loose gaggle of lightnings heading northwest toward Japanese airspace, toward the Zeros. McKenna remained motionless on the flight line long after the formation disappeared. The smell of aviation fuel hung in the morning heat. Somewhere in the distance, a generator rattled. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. All he could do now was wait. What happened in the next 17 minutes would change how every P-38 in the Pacific Theater flew. Before we continue, click that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It brings me great joy knowing that these war stories and lessons get to people all over the world. Your support helps us bring more thrilling war stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get back to the story. The P-38 Lightning was supposed to dominate the Pacific skies. Twin Allison engines putting out 1,425 horsepower each, 4 50 caliber machine guns, and 1 20mm cannon mounted in the nose. No need to calculate convergence. Everything fired straight ahead. Top speed of 415 mud at Memphis altitude. Service ceiling above 40,000 feet. On paper, it was the most lethal fighter in the theater. Against the Mitsubishi A6M-0, it was a coffin. The Zero weighed 5,300 pounds fully loaded. The P-38 weighed 17,500. That weight difference translated directly into maneuverability. A Zero could complete a full 360-degree turn in roughly 14 seconds. A P-38 needed 28. In a dogfight, those 14 seconds were an eternity. American doctrine accounted for this. The tactical manual was explicit. P-38 pilots should never engage Zeros in turning combat. Use your advantages, speed and altitude. Engage from above, dive to attack speed, make one firing pass, then climb back to altitude. Hit and run. Never turn. Never try to outmaneuver them. Every pilot in the 5th Air Force knew this doctrine by heart. Every briefing hammered it home. It didn't matter. Combat didn't follow doctrine. The Zeros had learned to bait American pilots into turns. They'd feint, draw the P-38 into committing to a maneuver, then reverse direction and cut inside the Americans' turn radius. Once a Zero got on your tail in a turning fight, you were finished. The P-38 couldn't roll fast enough to break away. McKenna had seen it happen 17 times in 2 months. Lieutenant David Chen, Lieutenant Thomas Parker, Captain William Morrison. He remembered their names, remembered working on their aircraft the mornings they died. Everything had checked out, engine timing perfect, control surfaces aligned, cable tensions within specifications. The airplanes were fine. The pilots still came back dead. The official reports always said the same thing: pilot error during defensive maneuvering, failure to maintain energy, failure to follow doctrine. But McKenna had started noticing a pattern. The pilots who survived turning engagements all reported the same sensation. The controls felt sluggish, mushy, like there was a delay between moving the stick and the aircraft responding. Most assumed it was just how the P-38 handled. A heavy fighter naturally felt less responsive than a light one. McKenna knew better. He'd felt that delay with his own hands during maintenance. When he tested the aileron cables, there was always a tiny amount of play, maybe 3/8 of an inch of slack before the tension caught. It was within Lockheed's factory specifications. The engineering manual said it was acceptable, but McKenna could hear it in the cables. When he plucked them during tension checks, they made a low, dull sound, not the tight, high-pitched twang of a properly tensioned wire. Something was wrong. At high speed, that slack probably didn't matter. The aerodynamic forces were strong enough to overcome any delay. But at low speed during hard maneuvering, when a pilot desperately needed instant response, that fraction of a second lag meant the difference between life and death. The problem wasn't pilot error. It was 3/8 of an inch of slack that nobody in California thought mattered. Lieutenant David Chen was the first pilot who made McKenna question everything. July 9th, 1943. Chen came back from a fighter sweep with 3 bullet holes stitched tight across his left boom. Perfect deflection shooting. The Zero pilot had led him exactly right, anticipated precisely where his aircraft would be. Chen was shaking when he climbed out of the cockpit. He told McKenna he'd tried to roll out and dive away, exactly like the manual said, but the airplane felt slow to respond, like there was a delay between stick input and aircraft movement. Just a fraction of a second, but enough. The Zero had almost gotten him. Only his wingman's gunfire had saved his life. McKenna examined the bullet holes. They were grouped within 18 inches of each other. That level of accuracy should have been impossible if Chen had executed an immediate hard roll and dive, unless the airplane had hesitated just long enough for the Zero pilot to get his lead perfect. 3 weeks later, Chen was killed flying a different P-38 over Rabaul. Same story. Caught in a turning fight. Couldn't roll out fast enough. Captain William Morrison died on August 3rd. Morrison was experienced. 11 kills. A flight leader who knew the P-38's limitations inside and out. He flew smart. He flew careful. During an engagement over Oro Bay, he got 1-0 on his first pass, then came around for another run. 2 zeros reversed on him. McKenna heard the radio traffic afterward from the tower operator. Morrison had called out that his controls felt mushy. He'd tried to roll inverted and split S away. A desperate maneuver, but one that should have worked. The zeros stayed with him through the entire maneuver. Shot him down at 4,000 feet. Morrison's wingman said it looked like Morrison was fighting his own airplane. Like the controls weren't responding fast enough. Morrison's crew chief was a friend of McKenna's, Rodriguez from Texas. After they recovered the wreckage, Rodriguez checked everything. Engine settings, control surface rigging, cable tensions. Everything was within spec. Nothing mechanically wrong. The official report still said pilot error. Rodriguez didn't believe it. Neither did McKenna. That night, McKenna went to the maintenance hangar alone. He pulled the inspection panel off a P-38's left boom and grabbed the aileron control cable with both hands, pulled hard, felt the slack, 3/8 of an inch of play before the tension caught. He did the same test on 4 other aircraft. Same result. Every P-38 on the line had that slack. Factory specifications, acceptable tolerances. Men were dying because of acceptable tolerances. The next morning, McKenna went to the engineering officer, explained what he'd found, explained the pilot testimonies, explained his theory about the delay. The engineering officer listened, then shook his head. Cable tension was within Lockheed's specifications. Changing it would void the warranty. Besides, field mechanics had no authority to modify flight control systems. That required engineering approval from California. The approval process could take months. McKenna asked how many more pilots would die in those months. The engineering officer didn't have an answer. He just repeated that regulations were regulations. That night, McKenna sat in his bunk and counted. 17 pilots dead in 8 weeks. Good men. Kids, mostly. He'd worked on their aircraft, signed their maintenance logs, watched them take off. The manual said they died because of pilot error. McKenna knew they died because nobody with authority would listen. Lieutenant Robert Hayes found McKenna in the maintenance area on the evening of August 16th. Hayes was young, 23, farm kid from Iowa, 6 missions and 0 kills. His hands were shaking when he asked the question, "Is there anything you can do to make the airplane roll faster? Anything at all?" McKenna looked at him, saw the fear, saw the desperation, saw a kid who knew he was going to die if something didn't change. "I don't care if it's regulation or not," Hayes said. "I just want a chance." McKenna told him to come back in the morning. He'd see what he could do. The maintenance hangar was quiet after 2,300 hours. Most of the crew had gone to sleep. The only sounds were the distant rumble of generators and the buzz of insects against the overhead lights. The air smelled like engine oil and tropical humidity. McKenna pulled the inspection panel off Hayes's P-38, left boom. The metal was still warm from the day's sun. Inside, the aileron control cable ran through a series of pulleys toward the tail section. He grabbed the cable with both hands and pulled. Felt the slack. 3/8 of an inch of play before the tension caught. His hands were covered in grease. His fingers ached from a full day of maintenance work. But he could feel that slack clearly. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong. The piano wire came from a salvaged P-38 that had ground-looped 2 weeks earlier. McKenna had pulled useful parts before it went to the depot, including a 6-inch piece of high-tensile wire from the rudder trim system. He'd kept it in his tool bag without really knowing why. Now he knew. He sat on the hangar floor with the wire and a pair of pliers. Bent it into a Z shape. The wire was stiff, fought back against the pliers. His hands slipped twice. Cut his thumb on the second try. The blood made the wire slippery. He wiped it on his coveralls and kept working. Took him 8 minutes to get the bend right. The Z-shape would act as an inline tensioner, just enough preload to eliminate the slack. Installing it was harder. The space inside the boom was tight. McKenna had to work with one hand while holding a flashlight with the other. The beam kept moving. Shadows jumped across the cable system. His shoulder wedged against the boom structure. The metal edge cut into his arm. He disconnected the cable at the pulley junction. His fingers fumbled with the clevis pin. Dropped it. Heard it bounce somewhere in the boom. Spent 5 minutes feeling around in the dark until he found it. The whole time his heart was pounding. If the engineering officer found him doing unauthorized modifications to a flight control system, he'd face court-martial, possibly dishonorable discharge, maybe prison time. But Hayes was going to die if McKenna didn't do something. He inserted the piano wire tensioner between the cable end and the pulley, reconnected the cable. The fit was tight. He had to force the clevis pin through. When it finally seated, he tested the tension by hand. No slack. The control surface moved immediately. Perfect. McKenna replaced the inspection panel, cleaned up his tools, wiped the blood off the wire and his hands, walked out of the hangar at Outmaneuver. The tropical night was humid and still. Somewhere in the distance, he heard aircraft engines, Japanese night raiders probably. He'd just violated at least a dozen regulations, used a non-standard part, modified a flight control system without authorization. If the modification failed during flight, Hayes would crash, and McKenna would be responsible, but if it worked, Hayes might live. McKenna went to his bunk, didn't sleep, watched the ceiling until dawn. If you enjoy dramatic, jaw-dropping stories, subscribe to World War II Archives Declassified. Let's grow this channel to 1,000 subscribers. The engagement started at Outmaneuver. Hayes's flight of 4 P-38s intercepted 9 Zeros at 13,000 feet over the Huon Gulf. The morning sun was behind them, perfect setup for a diving attack. Hayes was flying number 3 position. His element leader called out the bounce. They rolled in. Hayes picked a 0 at the back of the formation. Dove from altitude, built speed to 300 km/h. The 0 grew larger in his gun sight. He could see the painted rising sun on the fuselage, could see the pilot's head in the canopy. He pressed the trigger. The 4 50 caliber machine guns and single 20mm cannon hammered. Tracers reached out. Most missed. A few hits sparked off the 0's wing. Not enough. The 0 snap-rolled right and dove. Hayes rolled to follow. That's when he felt it. The airplane responded instantly. No delay, no lag. The stick moved, and the aircraft rolled immediately. Hayes had never felt his P-38 move like that. It was like the airplane had been waiting for his command, and executed it the moment he gave it. He rolled 90 degrees in what felt like half the normal time, got his nose down. The 0 was right there in his sight picture. He fired again, 3-second burst. The rounds walked up the 0's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The 0's engine exploded. Pieces flew off. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell toward the jungle below, trailing black smoke. Hayes's first kill. No time to celebrate. His wingman called out 0's diving from above. Hayes looked up, saw 3 of them coming down fast. They'd seen him shoot down their friend. Now they wanted revenge. Hayes shoved the throttles forward, started to climb. But the Zeros were faster in the dive. They'd be on him in seconds. His only option was to reverse and fight. Every instinct screamed at him to keep climbing, keep running. That was the doctrine. But doctrine meant dying today. Hayes rolled hard left, pulled. The P-38 snapped around like nothing he'd ever experienced. The nose came through the horizon. He saw the lead Zero. It was turning to follow him, but hadn't expected Hayes to reverse that fast. The Zero was exposed. Hayes pulled lead, fired, hit the Zero in the left wing root. The wing folded. The Zero tumbled. 2 kills in 30 seconds. The other 2 Zeros tried to scissor with him, alternating turns to force an overshoot. Hayes stayed with them. Every time they reversed direction, his P-38 snapped into the turn instantly. No delay, no fighting the controls. The airplane did exactly what he wanted, the moment he wanted it. Like flying a different aircraft. Like someone had removed invisible weights from the control system. 1 Zero made a mistake. Reversed too hard. Bled too much speed. Hayes got inside his turn. Close range. Maybe 200 feet. He fired. Couldn't miss. The Zero came apart. Pieces of aircraft fell past Hayes's canopy. He felt the P-38 shudder as debris hit his right boom. 3 kills. The 4th Zero ran. Hayes didn't chase. He was low on fuel and ammunition. He climbed back to altitude, reformed with what was left of his flight. They headed home. The entire engagement lasted 7 minutes. When Hayes landed at Dobodura at 0903, McKenna was waiting on the flight line. Hayes shut down the engines, climbed out of the cockpit. His hands were shaking. His flight suit was soaked with sweat. He walked straight to McKenna, said 2 words. It worked. 6 other pilots had watched Hayes's engagement from altitude. Captain Frank Mitchell saw the entire fight from 15,000 feet. Mitchell was a flight leader in the 425th Fighter Group, experienced, cautious. He'd been watching Hayes's element engage the Zeros below when he noticed something impossible. Hayes's P-38 was rolling faster than any Lightning Mitchell had ever seen. The aircraft snapped through maneuvers like it weighed half what it should. Mitchell knew every pilot in the theater, knew their skill levels. Hayes was good, but not that good. Something was different about his airplane. After landing, Mitchell found Hayes in the debriefing room, asked him what had changed. Hayes said he should talk to Technical Sergeant McKenna. Mitchell found McKenna 2 hours later. Asked him directly, "What did you do to Hayes's airplane?" McKenna told him. "The piano wire tensioner, the cable modification, the unauthorized change to the flight control system." Mitchell listened without interrupting. When McKenna finished, Mitchell asked if he could have the same modification. McKenna explained the risks. The modification wasn't approved, wasn't tested. If something went wrong, both of them would face charges. Mitchell said he didn't care. He'd lost 4 pilots in his flight in the past month, all caught in turning fights. They couldn't escape. If there was something that could help them survive, he wanted it. Regulations could wait. That evening, McKenna modified Mitchell's P-38. Same piano wire tensioner, same installation method. Mitchell flew it the next morning. Came back raving about the improvement. Told his wingman. The wingman told McKenna he wanted it too. By August 20th, McKenna had modified 9 aircraft. Word spread through the squadron. Pilots started asking their crew chiefs if they'd heard about the cable modification. Some crew chiefs refused, said it was against regulations. Others were willing to try. McKenna showed them how. Cut the piano wire, bend it into a Z shape, install it as an inline tensioner, takes 8 minutes, changes everything. The modification spread pilot to pilot, mechanic to mechanic. No official documentation, no engineering approval, just whispered conversations in the ready room and maintenance area. Hayes shot down 2 more Zeros on August 22nd. Mitchell got 3 on August 25th. Other pilots started coming back from missions with kills. By early September, maybe 40 P-38s in New Guinea had the modification. The kill ratio started shifting. In July, American pilots in the Southwest Pacific lost 2 P-38s for every Zero destroyed. In August, it was 1.3 to 1. By September, it was nearly even. Something had changed, but officially, nobody knew what. Then the Japanese noticed. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai was one of Japan's top aces. 64 confirmed kills. He'd been fighting American pilots since Pearl Harbor. On September 3, 1943, Sakai engaged a P-38 over Wewak. He used his standard tactic, drew the American into a turning fight, waited for the P-38 to begin its roll, then snapped his turn back the opposite direction to get inside the American's turning radius. Except the P-38 reversed with him. Sakai had executed this maneuver dozens of times. He knew exactly how long it took a P-38 to roll, knew the timing perfectly. But this P-38 rolled faster than it should have. Sakai barely avoided a head-on collision. The American got guns on him. Sakai had to dive away. He returned to base confused and frustrated. Other experienced Japanese pilots reported similar encounters. The Americans weren't flying differently. They were still using the same tactics, but their aircraft were responding faster, fractionally, but enough to matter. Enough to disrupt the timing that Japanese pilots had learned to exploit. By the end of September, the 11th Air Fleet had lost 38 fighters in combat with P-38s. American losses in the same period were 22 aircraft. The ratio had reversed, and it all came down to a piece of piano wire that nobody was supposed to install. The modification never became official during the war. In October 1943, a maintenance inspector at Dobodura noticed inconsistent cable tension readings during a routine check. He traced the discrepancies to the piano wire tensioners, found them in 9 aircraft, then 14, then 23. He wrote a report, sent it up the chain of command. The report sat on desks for 3 weeks while officers debated what to do. The modification violated regulations. That was clear. Field mechanics had installed unauthorized parts into flight control systems without engineering approval. By the book, that warranted disciplinary action. Court-martial, possibly. But the modification was working. Fighter squadrons using the tensioners had measurably better kill ratios. Pilots were surviving engagements they shouldn't have survived. The statistics were impossible to ignore. The question wasn't whether the modification helped. The question was whether to punish the mechanics who'd installed it without authorization, or quietly approve it after the fact. In November, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea to evaluate the modification. They tested it, measured the cable tension, calculated the stress loads, ran flight tests with instrumented aircraft, interviewed pilots, examined the tensioners under microscopes. Their conclusion, the modification was safe and effective. More than that, it should have been part of the original design. The slack in the aileron cables had been within factory specifications, but those specifications hadn't accounted for low-speed combat maneuvering. The engineers in California had designed the P-38 for high-altitude interception, not dogfighting at 8,000 feet over the jungle. Field conditions had exposed a flaw the designers never anticipated. Lockheed integrated a similar tensioning system into the P-38J model that entered production in December 1943. The new system used a spring-loaded adjuster instead of piano wire, but the principle was identical. Eliminate slack, improve aileron response time. The official Lockheed documentation attributed the control system improvement to engineering analysis of field performance data. Technical Sergeant James McKenna's name didn't appear anywhere. No commendation, no medal, no mention in any report. The modification spread quietly through the Pacific Theater as new P-38J models arrived with factory-installed tensioners. Pilots noticed the improved handling. Crew chiefs noted it in maintenance logs. But the story of where the improvement came from, the sergeant who'd worked alone in a hangar with a piece of piano wire and a pair of pliers, never made it into official records. McKenna didn't ask for recognition, didn't file a complaint, didn't tell his story to reporters or historians. He just kept working, kept maintaining aircraft, kept watching pilots take off and hoping they'd come back. By the end of the war, the modification McKenna had installed illegally in August 1943 was standard equipment on every P-38 rolling off the production line. Lockheed never acknowledged him. The Army Air Force never thanked him. History moved on. But the pilots remembered. Lieutenant Robert Hayes survived the war. He flew 63 combat missions, shot down 11 Japanese aircraft, returned to Iowa in 1945, married his high school sweetheart, had 4 children, worked as a crop duster for 37 years. He never forgot what McKenna had done. Every year on August 17th, Hayes called McKenna to thank him for saving his life. The calls lasted maybe 5 minutes. Hayes would ask how McKenna was doing. McKenna would ask about the farm, the kids, the weather in Iowa. They'd talk about ordinary things, cars, engines, the cost of parts. Hayes never missed a year, not once in 43 years. Captain Frank Mitchell also survived. He became a squadron commander, led his unit through the Philippines campaign, shot down 16 aircraft. After the war, he stayed in the Air Force, retired as a colonel in 1963. He told the story of McKenna's modification to every young maintenance officer he supervised, made sure they understood that sometimes the best solutions come from enlisted mechanics who see problems the engineers miss. McKenna stayed in the Army Air Force until 1946, returned to California, went back to working on cars, opened his own garage in Long Beach in 1948. He worked on engines for 42 years, never talked much about the war. When people asked, he'd say he was a mechanic, fixed airplanes, that's all. In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications found references to the piano wire tensioner in maintenance logs from New Guinea. The historian tracked down McKenna through veteran registries. McKenna was 73 years old by then, still working part-time in his garage. The historian asked him about the modification. McKenna confirmed the story, said it wasn't anything special, just something that needed doing. The historian estimated that the modification may have saved between 80 and 100 American pilots' lives, based on survival rate improvements in squadrons that used it. McKenna said he never counted. He just remembered the pilots who came back. Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, the others, that was enough. James McKenna died in 2006 at age 88. He was buried in Pacific View Memorial Park in California. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II as an aircraft mechanic. It did not mention the piano wire tensioner, did not mention that he'd changed how American fighters flew, did not mention that he'd broken regulations to save lives. His garage in Long Beach is still there. Different owner now, But on the wall in the back office there's a faded photograph. A young mechanic in coveralls standing next to a P-38 Lightning. The date written on the back is August 1943, New Guinea. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through official channels or engineering committees. Through sergeants and mechanics who see problems, find solutions, and don't wait for permission to save lives. The doctrine said American pilots shouldn't turn with zeros. The engineers said the cable tension was within specifications. The manual said everything was fine. McKenna knew better. He trusted his hands more than the regulations. Trusted what he felt in the cables more than what the manual said was acceptable. Trusted his judgment more than the voices telling him to wait for approval from 7,000 miles away. 80 pilots lived because a mechanic refused to watch another kid die. History remembers the P-38 Lightning, remembers its speed, its firepower, its twin-boom silhouette against the Pacific sky. History rarely remembers the hands that fixed them. Don't just watch, subscribe. Help World War II Archives Declassified hit 1,000 subscribers.